I started driving for DoorDash about a year and a half ago, and on my very first day, I learned that I was going to get some strange delivery addresses. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened a few months ago. I live in a city that's just outside of San Antonio, Texas, so a lot of my time dashing is spent within the city. However, every now and then I'll get an order that takes me a couple of minutes outside of the city, but usually they tip well, so I'm always willing to pick those orders up. This one night though, I received an order from McDonald's that was to be delivered to an address that I didn't recognize. The street name was familiar, and I knew that it was just outside of the city, so I figured I would take it as my last delivery of the night before heading home. I waited at the McDonald's for the order and then notified the customer that their food was on the way, but I never got a response. I followed the GPS as I drove out of the city and onto the highway, which wasn't nearly as well lit. When I reached my exit, I started looking around to see if I recognized the house that I was delivering the food to, but as far as I could see, there were no buildings around. I started to get concerned that the DoorDash GPS had taken me to the wrong location, but just in case, I continued driving. I looked around each side of the road, but all I could see was a large stone fence on one side and an empty field on the other. I don't know why, but I started to get a really unnerved feeling in my bones as I kept following the GPS blindly. I turned the radio down so the car was filled with nothing but silence. The silence was broken when my phone rang. The GPS was telling me to turn left and that I had reached my destination. I looked toward the side of the road with the stone wall and noticed a paved pathway that led up to a gate that was slightly cracked open. I slowly pulled my car up to the gate, and that was when I realized where I was. My eyes widened as I stared out towards a field of tombstones and darkness. I looked down at my phone to make sure I was at the right place, but it seemed like that's where they wanted the delivery. I didn't even consider leaving my car as I looked out at the portion of the graveyard that was lit up by my headlights. I decided to call the customer to see if there was a problem with the address, but oddly enough, they didn't answer. I figured that they didn't recognize the number and chose not to answer, so I sent them a text letting them know that I was their dasher and was outside of the cemetery. It only took a second for them to text me back, but instead of telling me that I was at the wrong address like I expected, all they wrote was, "Come inside." I looked up from my phone to see if I could spot anyone inside of the cemetery, but all I could see were shadows. I responded by letting them know that I wasn't comfortable going inside the graveyard at night and requested that they meet me at the gate, but that time I didn't get a response. I checked my phone every few seconds for the next couple of minutes, but I didn't want to take my eyes away from the cemetery for too long. Every time I looked away, it felt like someone or something was watching me. I finally decided to send them another text, but before I could finish typing it out, I heard something that nearly made me drop my phone. A loud, pain-filled scream echoed through the graveyard. My eyes were locked onto the cemetery as I tried to figure out what I should do, and when I heard the same scream a second time, I knew that I needed to get out of there. I didn't want to take the food with me, so I simply cracked my door and placed it on the ground beside my car before backing out of the driveway as fast as I could. Once I was on the road, I used my car's Bluetooth to contact DoorDash support and explain what had just happened before finally heading back to my house. Later that night, I received a text from the customer that didn't mention their food at all. All it said was, "Sorry you couldn't stay longer." I blocked the number and have since been far more selective about the orders that I pick up, especially at night. In New York, I never needed a car, so at first I thought I was going to be left out of the opportunity to be a DoorDasher in the city. But when I found out that I could use my bike to make deliveries, that all changed. I started dashing and was able to start earning a little extra cash after my shift ended at work. It was great at first, but I have to admit there were some pretty bad days. I don't think I'll ever forget the time that I received my first special request on a delivery. It was around 7 p.m., and I was going to do another hour or two of dashing before heading back to my apartment when I picked up an order to bring food from this small Italian restaurant to a business 3 blocks over. I packed up the order into the container on the back of my bike and started cruising as smoothly as I could, but when I got to the address, I noticed that there were special delivery instructions. I pulled up the order and saw that the customer wanted me to pull around to the back side of the building and bring their food to the other entrance. I assumed that they meant some sort of employee entrance, so I didn't have any problem with that. As soon as I wheeled my bike into the alley though, my opinion quickly started to change. Now, I'm sure you've seen the movies with the New York City alleyways having a bunch of bad stuff in them, but it's really not like that all the time. For the most part, a back alley will just have some trash and maybe something gross, but as long as you're aware of your surroundings, you're not in as much danger as the movies make you think. That being said, as soon as I stepped into this alley, I could tell something was off. Not only was it particularly narrow, but there was absolutely no light coming out of the buildings on either side of it, when usually there would be some light from a window or something. I turned on my phone flashlight and decided to leave my bike toward the entrance to the alley. Thankfully, I was smart enough to turn it around and point it in the direction that I would need to ride it out of there. I walked through the alley with my flashlight out, and when I reached the gray door at the back of the building, I was surprised when I didn't see an employees only sign posted anywhere. I shot the customer a message and waited for them to respond, but while I waited, I thought I heard something coming from farther down the alley. It sounded like something was shuffling around, but when I shined my light, I didn't see anything. I figured it was just a rat and kept waiting. I heard the sound of the door clicking from the other side, as if it was about to open, and figured it was the customer. I got the food ready to hand over to them, but when they popped the door open, all I could see was a man in a ski mask and hood. I knew something was wrong, but couldn't react in time. The man reached out of the doorway, grabbed me by the collar, and pulled me inside. I fell through the doorway, but got back up to my feet as quickly as I could. The man tried to grab me again, but I managed to push him off of me as I used my back to open up the door behind me. I backed into the alley, keeping my hands out in front of me the whole time in case the man tried to come at me again. I didn't have my phone out anymore though, so I couldn't really see. That was when I heard the sound of someone coming up from behind me, which meant the shuffling noises I heard earlier weren't a rat. I felt two hands grab me by the shoulder. They tried to get a good grip on me, but as they pulled me in closer to them, I decided to whip my head backwards. I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head as it slammed into the attacker's face, but it got them to let go of me long enough to get away. I ran through the narrow alley toward my bike, and as I hopped onto it, I could hear the sound of footsteps coming from behind me. "Get that kid, man!" I heard someone yelling as I pushed off and started pedaling as fast as I could. I pulled out onto the sidewalk and started riding my bike as far away from the building as possible. I cut down multiple blocks to make sure that I wasn't being chased or followed anymore before I decided to head back to my apartment. I reported the customer to DoorDash, so hopefully they won't be able to use the app anymore. I don't know exactly what they wanted with me, but if I had to guess, they assumed a delivery driver would be an easy target to rob and maybe even get a car from. Lucky for me, I had my bike for a quick getaway. When DoorDash started providing its services in my small town, I couldn't have been happier. As a girl in college who doesn't always have access to a car, it was nice to be able to order delivery from some place that wasn't always a pizzeria. Sadly, I don't think I'll ever be able to use the app again after what happened a few months ago. I had just finished a long day at work, doing a double shift, and I didn't feel like cooking that night. So I decided to order some Mexican takeout. I live off campus, and the delivery driver got to my apartment at around 6:30 that night. I expected to just take my food from him, say thank you, and be done with it, but when I went to close the door, he put his hand out to stop it. I thought that was weird, but I didn't want to be rude, so I asked if he needed anything, which was when he asked me how long I'd lived there. I told him that I moved in at the beginning of the semester, but before he could ask any more questions, I let him know that I was really tired and just wanted to get inside to eat. He immediately seemed offended and said, "Sorry for taking up your precious time. Don't forget to tip your driver," before walking away. I felt bad, but at the end of the day, I just wanted my food and to relax. After eating my dinner, I decided to hop in the shower before watching some TV. I was about to get out of the shower when I heard something that made me turn the water off and listen. Is someone knocking? I thought to myself. I dried myself off as quickly as I could and threw some clothes on before walking out of the bathroom. By that point, I was sure that someone was knocking at the door. "Who is it?" I called out as I walked out of the bathroom. That was when the knocking stopped, but no one answered. "Hello?" I called out. This time a familiar sounding voice responded. Hi, this is Tyler, the DoorDasher from earlier." My eyes widened, and I immediately grabbed my phone and got ready to call the police. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I just wanted to talk about earlier." I waited a second before responding, but then I tried as calmly as I could to say, "Please go away. I don't like that you just showed up here." But once again, his tone changed. "Who do you think you are?" he said. "I just wanted to apologize." I heard the door handle start to shake as if he were trying to open my door. That was when I told him that I was going to call the police if he didn't leave, but that only made him angry. "Go ahead, call them," he yelled out as he was now slamming into my door, trying to force his way into the apartment. "They won't get here in time." I was starting to panic because I could tell by his voice that if he got in, he was going to hurt me. I called 911 as I ran back toward my bedroom and started barricading myself inside. They assured me that officers were on their way to my apartment, but I couldn't help but scream as I heard the sound of my front door crashing open. I could hear the guy from DoorDash running around my apartment looking for me, and by the time he got to my door, I could hear how out of breath he was from getting so angry. He started slamming into my bedroom door, but this time he didn't manage to get through. The police managed to get there just in time and arrested Tyler as he tried to run out of my apartment. They assured me that he wouldn't be able to hurt me, but I didn't feel safe in that apartment anymore. I went to my friend's dorm on campus and stayed there for a few days while I figured out where I was going to move. I ended up finding a room in a house off campus that my friends were renting, so I moved in with them. Like I said though, I don't think I'll ever be ordering from a site like DoorDash again.